He thought I was just another intern he could intimidate. But when he finally learned who my father was, his smirk disappeared, and his career went up in flames. When I first walked into the glossy headquarters of Westbrook Industries, everything gleamed with intimidation. Polished marble floors, glass walls that reflected every anxious step, and the faint hum of ambition that never seemed to sleep. I was 22, fresh out of college, clutching my tote bag like it was armor. Most people thought I had landed the internship through sheer luck. And in a way, they were right. I hadn't gotten in by standing in a sea of resumes. I hadn't competed through a brutal round of interviews. No, my father was the CEO. But no one knew that. Not my team, not my manager, not the smug guy who would soon make my life a living hell. Dad had insisted I keep it quiet. I don't want them to treat you differently, Claire, he told me over dinner. I want you to see how this place really works. Earn their respect, not their fear. So I became just another intern. Claire Morgan, the eager, slightly nervous girl with a background in communications and an eye for detail. I told myself it would be fine. That if I worked hard, they'd see me for my talent, not my last name. For the first week, it almost felt true. My direct supervisor, Mark, was busy but polite. He handed me spreadsheets to clean, presentations to polish, emails to draft. I worked late, nodded dutifully, and soaked up everything like a sponge. Other interns whispered about the pressure, but I found comfort in the rhythm. Numbers, slides, meetings. It was a false stability I didn't recognize as fragile. Enter Ryan. He wasn't my supervisor, not technically. He was a mid-level project manager with a reputation for being both charming and ruthless, depending on who you asked. He was tall, sharp-suited, with a permanent smirk that made you feel like he knew a secret you didn't. The first time he spoke to me, it was in the break room. "You're new," he said, leaning casually against the counter as the coffee machine whirred. I nodded. "Claire. Communications intern." He looked me up and down in a way that felt more like an appraisal than a greeting. "Intern, huh? Guess we'll see if you last longer than the last one." I laughed awkwardly, unsure if it was a joke. He didn't smile back. At first, his presence was just background noise. He'd pass my desk with a comment about how slow I typed or how green I looked in meetings. He'd chuckle when I fumbled with the printer. I brushed it off as office banter. After all, corporate life was supposed to be cutthroat, wasn't it? Everyone had to toughen up eventually. But what unsettled me most wasn't what he said, it was the way others reacted. Colleagues exchanged glances but never intervened. Mark ignored it, too busy to notice. The silence around me made Ryan's words echo louder. Still, I swallowed the discomfort, telling myself not to be overly sensitive. At home, I'd sit across from Dad at the dinner table, biting my tongue while he asked, "How's work going?" I didn't dare tell him about Ryan. I didn't want him to think I couldn't handle it, that I wasn't strong enough for the world he'd built. I needed to prove myself, to everyone, including him, so I played the part. The diligent intern. The one who stayed late to triple-check reports. The one who smiled when Ryan made a joke at my expense. The one who let the whispers of discomfort settle like dust, too afraid to stir them up. I didn't know it yet, but this was the calm before the storm, the illusion of control before the harassment spiraled into something darker. Because the stability I thought I had was never real. It was only the fragile surface, waiting to crack. The first Rayall warning came on a Tuesday afternoon, buried between back-to-back meetings and the endless hum of keyboards. I was hunched over my desk, red penning a presentation slide for Mark, when Ryan's shadow fell across my papers. "You missed a comma," he said flatly, pointing at the screen. I blinked up at him, startled. "It's just a draft. Draft or not, mistakes like that make us all look bad." His voice was low, sharp enough to cut. He leaned closer, his cologne overwhelming, his smirk wider than ever. "But don't worry. You'll learn, if you survive long enough." I forced a tight smile, my pulse quickening. It was the first time his tone carried something heavier than mockery. It was a test, a reminder of the power he thought he held. From that day, the small comments escalated. In meetings, he'd interrupt me mid-sentence, "What she means is," and then rephrase my idea as his own. When I presented a report, he'd raise an eyebrow and ask, "Did you do this all by yourself?" Impressive, if it's actually accurate. Laughter would ripple across the room, never challenged, never questioned. I started dreading his footsteps. The office, once intimidating but manageable, began to feel like a trap. Every time I logged into my computer, I braced myself for the inevitable. An email from Ryan, dripping with condescension. "Check your numbers again. We don't want rookie mistakes." Or, "Do you even understand the software you're using?" Always copied to half the team. Always making me look incompetent. And yet, when I glanced at Mark, my supervisor, he never seemed to notice. Or maybe he chose not to. The silence of others only amplified Ryan's voice, until it was the only one I heard. The first warning bell should have been the night he cornered me in the parking garage. It was late, too late for an intern to still be at the office, but Mark had dumped an urgent task on my desk at 6:45 p.m. By the time I finished, the building was nearly empty. My heels echoed against the concrete as I made my way to my car, clutching my tote bag like a shield. "Working late, rookie?" His voice bounced off the walls before I even saw him. Ryan stepped out from behind a pillar, hands in his pockets, his smile too wide for the dimly lit garage. My chest tightened. "Just finishing up some reports." He tilted his head, studying me like prey. "That's the thing about interns. You're always so eager. Always desperate to please." I tried to laugh it off, fumbling for my keys. "Well, that's kind of the job." "Sure," he said, stepping closer. "But eagerness can look a lot like desperation. and desperation. His smirk deepened. That can be dangerous in this world. My hands shook as I slid into my car, forcing a smile I didn't feel. He tapped on the window once before walking away, leaving me rattled long after I drove off. That night, I lay awake replaying every word. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just pushing me to toughen up. But the knot in my stomach said otherwise. The first warning bell had rung loud and clear. And deep down, I knew things were only going to get worse. By the third week of my internship, Ryan had turned my life into a slow-burn nightmare. The first comments and smirks had grown into something darker, constant, relentless pressure that tightened around me like a vice. It wasn't just the parking garage anymore. It was everywhere. In the office kitchen, he'd slide too close when reaching for the coffee, murmuring, "Careful, rookie, you might spill." In team meetings, he'd cut across my sentences, his voice louder, smoother, practiced for authority. "What Claire's trying to say," he'd begin, earning chuckles from colleagues while my own voice vanished beneath his. Emails became *P***NS. He'd CC executives on trivial mistakes, inflating them into disasters. Claire forgot to attach the revised version, again. "We might want to reconsider who handles these tasks." He never lied outright, just twisted the truth enough to paint me as careless. And people believed him. Or worse, they didn't care enough to question. Even the interns I had bonded with at orientation started pulling away. Sarah, who used to eat lunch with me, suddenly had other plans. Kevin, who once joked about the endless spreadsheets, now sat with Ryan at the cafeteria, laughing at jokes I wasn't invited to hear. Isolation seeped into every corner of my day. At home, Dad noticed the change. "You're quiet lately," he said one evening as we cleared the table. His eyes lingered on my face, searching. "Are they overworking you?" I forced a smile, burying the exhaustion under practiced cheer. "It's just busy. I'll adjust." How could I tell him? How could I admit that the company he built, the empire he was so proud of, had become my personal battlefield? Worse, how could I tell him that one of his own managers was the enemy? Instead, I bottled it up, replaying Ryan's words at night when I should have been sleeping. "You're desperate. You're incompetent. You don't belong here." Slowly, I started to believe him. The breaking point came one Friday afternoon. Mark had asked me to prepare a draft of a presentation for Monday's executive meeting. I worked late into the night perfecting it, double-checking every number, every graph. On Friday, I printed it and left it on Mark's desk before heading home. By Monday morning, the presentation had been butchered. Slides rearranged, numbers swapped, charts mislabeled. When the file was projected in the conference room, executives frowned, whispering to each other. Mark's jaw tightened. "Claire," he said sharply in front of everyone, "what happened here? These numbers are completely wrong." My face burned. I don't understand. They were correct when Ryan leaned back in his chair, smirking. "It's a learning curve. We can't expect interns to get everything right." The room chuckled politely, dismissing me in an instant. I wanted to scream that it wasn't me, that someone had sabotaged my work. But who would believe the intern over the seasoned project manager? After the meeting, I found the printed copy I'd left on Mark's desk, untouched, still perfect. My stomach dropped. Someone had swapped the file. And only one person stood to benefit from my humiliation. I confronted Ryan in the hallway, my voice shaking. "You changed my slides." His smirk widened. "Prove it." Those two words crushed me. Because he was right, I couldn't. Not without exposing myself further, not without dragging in people who didn't care enough to fight for me. That night, I drove home gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles whitened. The company felt like a cage, Ryan the guard tightening the bars with every passing day. My friends were gone, my reputation crumbling, my confidence bleeding out of me. I was trapped, isolated, powerless. At least, that's what Ryan thought. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that his power had an expiration date. And when it came, it would destroy him. The weekend after the sabotaged presentation, I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, my thoughts circling like vultures. I'd never felt so trapped. Ryan had poisoned my reputation, isolated me from colleagues, and left me too afraid to speak up. If I told Mark, he'd shrug it off. If I told HR, I'd be branded the problem intern. But the truth was bubbling beneath the surface, waiting for the moment it couldn't be ignored anymore. That moment came sooner than I expected. On Monday morning, I arrived early, earlier than usual, hoping the quiet office might give me a break from the suffocating tension. As I stepped out of the elevator, voices echoed down the corridor. I recognized one immediately. "Ryan." I froze, ducking behind the corner near the conference room. "She's weak," Ryan was saying, his voice dripping with contempt. "She doesn't belong here. Honestly, I'm doing the team a favor. If she quits, that's one less deadweight." A second voice chuckled. "Careful, man. She might complain." Ryan laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "Let her. No one will believe her. She's just an intern. And between you and me," his voice dropped lower but the words still carried, "I wouldn't mind if she quit tomorrow. Makes my job easier. Besides, she's fun to push around." The other man muttered something I couldn't hear, but Ryan's final words rang clear. "She should thank me. One day, she'll realize I was teaching her how the real world works." My stomach lurched. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my coffee. It wasn't just in my head. He wasn't just tough on interns. He was targeting me, deliberately, cruelly, gleefully. I backed away, heart racing, and ducked into the restroom until my breathing slowed. When I finally looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see the eager intern who had walked into Westbrook Industries 3 weeks ago. I saw someone cornered, someone shrinking. And I hated it. That night, while pacing my bedroom, I pulled out my phone and texted Emily, a college friend who had gone into law. How do you prove workplace harassment? I asked. She called me immediately. Start documenting everything, she said. Emails, notes, times, witnesses, anything you can gather. Even if you think it's small. Build your case quietly. Don't let him know you're onto him. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control. So I started. Every email Ryan sent, I forwarded to myself. Every comment he made, I jotted down in a notebook with the time and date. I saved screenshots, photographed my corrected reports before handing them in, even recorded snippets of his feedback when he cornered me in the office kitchen. And then, almost by accident, I stumbled across something far bigger. Late one evening, tasked again with staying behind to double-check numbers, I noticed Ryan had left his laptop open on the shared desk. His email was pulled up, cursor blinking. I shouldn't have looked. I knew it. But something drew my eyes to the subject lines. Half a dozen emails to another manager. Subject: the intern. My pulse thundered as I skimmed the previews. She's clueless. Can't wait until she cracks. Bet she won't last another week. Another one. Mark's blind. She's embarrassing us. Honestly, I don't care if she cries. Maybe she'll toughen up. My hands shook as I scrolled further, until I found the one that nearly made me drop the laptop. She acts like she belongs here, but she's nothing. She'll never measure up. And if she tries to complain, I'll bury her. People listen to me, not some rookie. She's powerless. Something inside me snapped. For weeks, I had doubted myself, questioned if maybe I was too sensitive, too inexperienced to survive in this world. But here it was in black and white, deliberate sabotage. He wasn't pushing me to improve, he was trying to break me. And he thought he'd succeed because he believed I was powerless. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know whose daughter I was. And in that moment, a thought crystallized in my mind, sharp and undeniable. When the time came, I wouldn't just expose him. I'd destroy the very foundation he stood on. Once I saw those emails on Ryan's laptop, the fear that had been strangling me for weeks began to loosen its grip. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. He had been orchestrating my downfall with smug precision. But in his arrogance, he'd left a trail, and I had caught it. The next morning, I walked into the office with my chin a little higher. Ryan still smirked when he passed my desk, still made his cutting remarks, but something had changed. He didn't know it yet, but I was no longer playing defense. I was preparing my counterstrike. Emily helped me set up a secure folder where I stored everything: screenshots, emails, notes, recordings. Each piece of evidence was another brick in the wall I was building against him. She reminded me to stay calm, not to tip my hand too soon. People like Ryan thrive on the illusion of power, she said. The moment you rip that away, they collapse. It was easier said than done. Every day still felt like walking through fire. In one meeting, he jokingly suggested I should fetch coffee instead of contributing to the discussion. In another, he passed around a memo with my name misspelled deliberately, drawing snickers from two colleagues. But instead of shrinking under the humiliation, I calmly noted the time and context. My secret arsenal was growing. The turning point came during a team lunch. Ryan had organized it, of course, positioning himself at the head of the table like a king presiding over his court. I sat near the end, quiet, invisible. That's when he launched into one of his favorite games, dissecting the interns. So, Claire, he said loudly, stabbing a piece of steak with his fork. Tell us again why you wanted this internship. Because judging by your performance, it sure wasn't for the work. Laughter rippled around the table. My cheeks burned, but this time, I didn't shrink. Instead, I smiled. Funny you say that, Ryan, because I think my work speaks for itself. But it's nice to know you're paying such close attention. The table went silent. He blinked, caught off guard by my composure. Then the smirk returned, but thinner, tighter. I could feel the power shifting, ever so slightly. Later that evening, Emily and I finalized our plan. If Ryan wanted to keep escalating, I'd let him dig his own grave. But when I revealed who I really was, the daughter of the CEO, he wouldn't just lose face. He'd lose everything. The perfect opportunity arrived in the form of the quarterly staff mixer. Everyone from interns to executives would be there, including my father. It was the one event Ryan couldn't manipulate, the one stage too big for his petty games. In the days leading up, Ryan was relentless. He loaded me with extra assignments, criticized my reports in front of others, even accidentally spilled coffee on one of my presentations. Each slight fueled the fire burning inside me. Finally, the night of the mixer arrived. The ballroom buzzed with chatter, glasses clinking, music humming softly in the background. I wore a navy dress and heels, my heart pounding like a drum. Ryan spotted me almost immediately, striding over with his trademark smirk. "Didn't expect you here," he said smoothly. "This is usually for people who matter." I forced a calm smile. "Well, I guess I'll just have to prove I belong." He chuckled, already turning away to schmooze with a group of managers. He had no idea what was coming. When my father walked into the room, heads turned. He was charismatic, commanding, the kind of man who drew attention without asking for it. I caught his eye, and he gave me the smallest nod, our silent pact still intact. For now. Ryan, ever the opportunist, saw my father too. "That's the big boss," he whispered to a colleague, clearly impressed. "One day, I'll be on his radar." He had no idea he already was. By the end of the night, Ryan had made his usual rounds, tossing barbs at me whenever he passed. "Don't trip in those heels, rookie," he muttered once. Try not to embarrass yourself. Another time. Each comment slid into my growing catalog of evidence. And then, when the speeches began, the moment arrived. My father took the microphone, thanking everyone for their hard work, praising the teams for their dedication. He mentioned the interns too, highlighting the importance of giving young professionals a chance to shine. My chest tightened as I realized what was about to happen. And of course, he said with a smile, I'm particularly proud to have my daughter Claire joining us this summer. The room erupted in applause. I felt dozens of eyes turn toward me, warmth and recognition in their gazes. But I wasn't watching them. I was watching Ryan. The smirk vanished from his face as if someone had slapped it off. His jaw dropped, his eyes darting between me and my father like he couldn't compute what he was hearing. His confident posture faltered, shoulders sinking as realization dawned. I held his gaze across the room, my expression calm, unflinching. For the first time, he looked away. He finally understood. The powerless intern he'd tormented wasn't powerless at all. And his reckoning was only beginning. The moment my father announced my name, the applause washed over me like a tidal wave. I should have felt relief, maybe even pride. But all I felt was the weight of Ryan's stare burning into me from across the room. He didn't approach me right away. For the rest of the mixer, he hovered at the edges, stiff, nervous, his usual swagger gone. I watched him nurse his drink, his jaw tightening each time someone shook my hand or congratulated me. But I knew him well enough by now. Ryan wasn't the type to retreat quietly. He'd lash out, desperate to reclaim control. And I was ready. The next morning, he cornered me in the hallway outside the conference rooms, his smile strained, his voice dripping with false sweetness. So, Daddy's little girl. Guess that explains a lot. I met his gaze evenly. Explains what? That you got this internship. That people look the other way when you mess up. That you're not here because of merit, but because of bloodlines. His words should have stung, but instead, I laughed softly. Funny. You seemed pretty confident when you thought I was just another intern. What changed? For the first time, he faltered. The smirk slipped. I've been documenting everything, Ryan, I said quietly, my voice steady as steel. Every email, every comment, every time you sabotaged me. I have it all. His face paled. And now, I continued, you've shown me exactly who you are, not just to me, but to anyone watching. You underestimated me because you thought I was powerless. But the truth is, you handed me the power yourself. You left the trail. You gave me the evidence. All I had to do was pick it up. He tried to recover, straightening his tie, forcing a laugh. You wouldn't dare. Do you know what this would do to the team? To your reputation? People hate whistleblowers. Claire. They'll hate you too. I stepped closer, my voice low enough that only he could hear. I don't need to be a whistleblower. I just need to tell the truth. And the truth is, you've been harassing me for weeks. You tried to bury me. And now. I tilted my head. Now I'll bury you. His mask cracked completely then. He stammered something about misunderstandings and jokes taken the wrong way, but I didn't give him the chance to finish. That afternoon, I scheduled a private meeting with HR. Emily had already helped me organize the evidence into a clear, irrefutable timeline, emails, recordings, corroborating notes from other interns who had witnessed his behavior. When I placed the folder on the desk, the HR director's eyes widened. Claire, this is serious. It's harassment, I said firmly. And it's deliberate. He needs to be held accountable. The director nodded, her tone grave. Leave this with me. We'll investigate immediately. By the next morning, whispers swirled through the office. Ryan hadn't shown up to work. By lunchtime, everyone knew he'd been suspended pending investigation. The final blow came 2 weeks later. I was called into the executive boardroom, where my father sat at the head of the table, flanked by senior leaders. Ryan was there too, pale and sweating, a shell of the man who once strutted through the office like he owned it. The HR director laid out the evidence, piece by piece. Ryan tried to deny it, but every email, every recording, every witness statement shredded his defense. Finally, my father spoke. His voice was calm, but each word landed like a hammer. Ryan, I trusted you with my company, and you chose to abuse that trust by targeting someone you thought was powerless. You forgot one of the first rules of leadership. Character matters more than ambition. Ryan swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward me. For the first time, he didn't look smug or superior. He looked afraid. You're finished here, my father concluded. Effective immediately. Security escorted him out of the building as the rest of the board watched in silence. I sat still, my hands folded, my expression unreadable. Inside, a storm of emotions raged. Vindication, relief, exhaustion. The battle was over. Ryan had lost. But as I left the boardroom, I realized something even more important. This wasn't just about him. This was about me reclaiming my voice, my strength, my place in a world that had tried to silence me. And for the first time since stepping into Westbrook Industries, I felt like I truly belonged. When Ryan was escorted out of the building, you could feel the entire office exhale at once. Conversations that had once halted whenever he entered resumed with cautious relief. People no longer avoided my eyes. Some even smiled at me in quiet solidarity, as though they had all been waiting for someone to finally pull the curtain back on him. But inside me, it wasn't so simple. Victory doesn't erase scars. That evening, I walked through the city streets, the skyscrapers lit up like watchful guardians above me. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from interns thanking me, colleagues expressing support, even a few apologies from those who had looked the other way while Ryan reigned unchecked. Still, I couldn't shake the thought of how easily it could have gone differently. If I hadn't documented every comment, every sneer, every attempt to corner me, the narrative could have been twisted against me. My story could have been dismissed as exaggeration, or worse, as a vendetta. The following weekend, I sat in my father's study. The fire crackled in the hearth, its glow reflecting in his eyes as he regarded me with something I'd rarely seen from him before: pride. "You handled yourself with grace," he said simply. "You didn't just protect yourself, you protected this company. People will remember that." I hesitated, staring at the framed family photos on his desk. "But they'll also remember that I'm your daughter. Some will think that's the only reason I had the strength to act." He shook his head. "Claire, being my daughter might have given you a spotlight. But you stood in it. You chose to fight. That was all you." His words mattered more than I expected. For years, I'd felt like an outsider in his world of boardrooms and power suits. Now, for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just borrowing space, I'd earned it. Still, I didn't want to let this experience define me solely as the boss's daughter. I wanted to be more than the girl who exposed Ryan. So I threw myself into my work with a new kind of determination. I pitched ideas during meetings instead of staying silent. I mentored new interns, reminding them to document their progress and never downplay their own value. I started lunch hour sessions where we shared skills, presentation techniques, networking tips, confidence-building strategies. Slowly, I began carving out an identity that wasn't tethered to my father's title. Months passed, and the fear that once lived in the pit of my stomach gave way to something sturdier: resolve. I no longer jumped when my phone buzzed with a message. I no longer doubted whether I belonged in the office. And then came the moment that confirmed everything had changed. At the end of the quarter, I was called into a board meeting. My father wasn't there this time. It was the senior directors, the people who had once eyed me as little more than a nepotism hire. They handed me a letter, an official offer to step into a junior leadership role in one of the company's upcoming projects. It wasn't handed to me because of my last name, it was offered because of the initiative I'd shown, the leadership I'd demonstrated, and the courage I'd proven in the darkest of circumstances. When I left that room, letter in hand, I allowed myself to finally breathe deeply. Ryan's shadow no longer hung over me. That night, Emily and I celebrated with takeout pizza and cheap champagne in my apartment. We laughed until our sides hurt, remembering the ridiculous things Ryan had said, the irony that he had been so eager to break me down, only to be undone by his own arrogance. Poetic justice, Emily called it, clinking her glass against mine. But to me, it was more than that. It was a lesson etched into my bones. Never let anyone convince you that your worth is defined by their opinion. Harassers, manipulators, bullies, they thrive on silence. And silence is the one thing I will never give them again. Now, when I walk into Westbrook Industries each morning, I no longer feel like a trembling intern bracing for the next blow. I feel like a woman who survived fire and came out tempered, stronger than steel. Ryan thought he could crush me. Instead, he taught me to rise. And as I look at the skyline outside my office window, I know this is only the beginning.